Let's now implement real-world error handling in our application instead of always simply logging errors to the console. And again, the error that we're going to work with is basically using a false ID that cannot be found on the server. So indeed, we get our error message invalid ID and then the ID itself plus the status code. Now, the real-world way of handling an error like this is to actually display some message here in the user interface so that the user can actually know what's going on. So basically, handling the error will mean to display an error message here in the view. So right now, we are handling the error actually in the model, right? So remember how I said that for now, handling the error is simply logging it here with these small emoji here. And so again, that's basically our current error handling strategy. However, it is not correct, and also it doesn't happen in the correct place. Because if we want to display something in the view, then of course that code should also be in the view and not in the model. So let's go back to our code and to our view and implement a new method here, which is going to be responsible for displaying that error message. And actually, the HTML code is already here in this template. So it's going to be this class here, or this element with the class of error. So let's copy this, go to the view, and then let's put it here after the spinner. So render error, and then like this. And for some reason here I declared like a normal function, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And now let's create a new markup variable as always when we create some new markup, which is exactly what we're doing here. Then here, remember, we need to replace this with the icons variable. And then here, of course, we want to have like some custom message. So we don't simply want this hard-coded message, but instead we want to be able to pass a message into this method. So that's going to be message like this. And so let's add a parameter here for that. Okay. And then here, let's clear the parent element. So like this. And actually, we should do the same here. So this dot clear is a lot nicer than having to write all of this. And so we abstracted all that away into this method. And now we can basically simply get this code because it's going to be the same, right? The variable here is still called markup, and we still want to basically insert this HTML into the parent element. So that's, again, this element with the recipe class. Okay, and so that's actually it here for the view, at least. Okay, so let's now go to the model, because remember that right now we are actually handling the error right here, like this. But again, that's not what we want. So we want a way of getting this error into the view. Now, these two are only connected by the controller. And so, of course, it is going to be the controller who will call recipe view, right? So let's do that actually. So that's going to be right here in the catch block of the control recipes controller. So recipe view dot render error and then some message. But what is this message going to look like? Or in other words, where are we going to get it from? Because now we have the same problem as before. So remember, here in the helpers function, whenever we got this error, then that error was not automatically propagated down to this async function, which was actually calling the getJSON function. And so therefore, we had to rethrow the error here. So basically to mark this whole promise here as rejected, so that then here we would get into this catch block. But now here again, we have the same problem, because now if we get an error here, then this promise, so this whole load recipe promise will also not get rejected. And so therefore, here we will never enter the catch block in this function. So it's a bit confusing, like the flow of the error and how we need to propagate it down. But essentially, we will have to do the same thing as before, which is to throw the error here again. And so with this, we will then have access to the exact same error object as we have here, and otherwise we wouldn't. So now we can use the same thing here. Let's actually get rid of this console.log. And so now here our error handling is basically finally complete. So instead of simply logging it to the console, we now have a way of rendering it to the user interface. And we will be able to access the exact same error that we also got access to here in the load recipe function. Okay, so let's try this. And indeed, here we get the error message, and it is exactly the same one that is logged down here from the model. Okay, however, this is actually not really that useful. So, well, this error is not really meaningful for anyone using this application. And so actually, this is not the message that we want. So let's create a more meaningful message. So something like, we couldn't find that recipe. Now, do you think that we should pass in that message here? So basically specifying we couldn't or we could not find that recipe. Please try another one. So again, do you think that this is the correct place of specifying this message, which will get eventually rendered to the view? Well, actually, I think that it is not. So I think that this error message should basically be an intrinsic property of the view itself. So basically, I'm going to cut this from here now. And now in the view, I will add just another private field. So it's going to be called error message, and then the message itself. And so now, basically, the view itself already knows the message that it wants to display. Okay? And then here, in render error, we will actually keep the ability of passing in a message. But if no message is passed in, then we will simply set a default. And so that default is going to be the error message that we just specified. Okay? So here we don't pass anything now. And so by doing this, we are back to having no code that is regarded to the view here in our controller. All right. And so instead, the error message is then by default set to the message, or actually the other way around. So the message argument is going to be set by default to this error message that we set for this entire object. So I think that is the best solution, which makes the most sense. And so indeed, here we now get exactly that message. And so with this, we now have a very robust and very nice error handling strategy that we will then be able to use for other errors also in the future. So for example, when there are no search results for some search term. Okay. Now, since we did an error message here, let's very quickly also implement a method here for success messages, even though we don't need it yet. But it's still good to already prepare for that in the future. And so since we are working on messages here, let's do that right away. So let's call this one simply render message. And this one here will have a different class. I think it should also be somewhere here. And actually, it's this default. So this is actually the one that we will use. So it has the class of message, but then the rest of the code is actually the same. So message, and actually not the same. So the icon is also different. So here it's icon smile. So instead of the alert, it is a smile. And then here we will want some kind of message again. And so here let's now create simply yet another field called message. Could also call it like success message, but let's leave it like this. And for now, we don't have any success message because again, we're not actually going to use this for now. But message, and then the rest should essentially be the same. And then in the future, of course, we will be able to use the success message in some different places in our application. All right, and that's actually it. Let's put it back to some normal URL. We can just click here. And then, of course, everything is back to working. Great. And with this, we are actually finally ready to implement now the searching functionality starting in the next lecture.